This is every way Minecraft has changed over the years. How many of these do you remember? Well, let's see if you're a Minecraft veteran, starting with, if you go into like a monster spawner room like this, usually you could find saddles in the chests. That's not gonna be the case now, since now, in place of saddles, it'll generate leather and iron because we can craft saddles.
Yes! Finally!
Finally! Oh my god, it's been years.
It's literally just 3 leather over an iron ingot. During snapshot 19W39A, if you were to remove a pillager's crossbow from its inventory, it would actually remove its arms. But now it's since been changed that if a pillager were to drop its crossbow, it's effectively pacified and it still has arms, which makes sense. I never really thought of the crossbow as being part of its body.
In case you didn't know, leaves in Bedrock Edition turn white when you leave them in the snow. But if you play that version and you never noticed, that might not be your fault, since it's not an instant transition. And instead, it'll take some time in the tundra before it finally changes their tone.
In the April Fool's snapshot for 25W14, Craft Mine, there was a secret villager variant added in called traders. And they weren't meant to be traded with, but instead, they would buy minerals like diamonds from the player, and they would trade those for emeralds and mine ingredients. And they looked like illagers, which were disguising themselves in villager cloaks. The warden went through a whole bunch of different concept variations, but one of the strangest ones that I've seen, as opposed to the hollowed or other versions that we've seen in the past, is this one, where we saw these more ethereal versions, looking a lot more like an LA kind of ghost as opposed to anything that we're seeing in the game now, which would have been a lot more fitting for Minecraft than some of the creepy ones that I've seen in the past. This is a change we've been asking for a while, which is that now our dye textures have been changed to have each of them look distinct even without seeing the different colors. So, shulkers with the invisibility effect used to still show their heads, just removing their shell with the effect. But now, if you were to make a shulker invisible, the whole mob turns invisible. And that's been the change since snapshot 24W33A, which works out pretty well if you want to make invisible mob-based blocks. And you can even see that in Mysticat's old building a house underneath the void video, where their shulkers were always present. Prior to snapshot 19W08A, it actually used to be possible to equip armor onto pandas. Much like villagers, they have a secret inventory, allowing us to apply things like Thorn's armor into their armor slot. But unfortunately, this was removed, much like it was for dolphins.
Using lapis lazuli to enchant seems expensive, but it used to be so much worse, since back in the day, it would require 50 levels for a max level enchant. And folks, that's not just 50 levels to qualify, that's 50 levels for one enchantment. And even though that got bumped down to 30 levels in 1.3.1, it was eventually entirely reworked in 1.8 to where you just need 3 levels after you hit the 30 level enchant barrier.
Now, if we go into the controls menu in our options settings, you can set it so that your attack/destroy button, usually your left click, is now set to toggle. Now in the past we would do this for our AFK farms, usually by just making it so that you would hold down your left click and then use F3 and T to get it started. But now we can just have it where we're automatically farming cobblestone without ever having to actually touch the keyboard in any kind of way. When Mojang's developing new mobs, they typically like to add in placeholders, and usually the placeholder for a lot of that is diamonds. So that meant that back in this tweet from Henrik Nyberg on January 14th of 2020, it used to be that when you would give a piglin gold, it would give you in return diamonds.
Now this is a lava bucket, and this is a lava source block. So how do we get both in our inventory? Well, in the past, the give command was a lot stronger than it is today. So if you typed in /give player 10 or 11, it would give you either flowing or stationary lava blocks. And as you can probably guess, this got removed in 1.8, which is too bad, but honestly, I don't know the point of having one of these versus just a regular lava bucket.
Camels have a glitch where if you put them inside of a minecart, they would constantly play their running animation when you would push it. And this existed more in older versions of the game. And you could also previously make it so that you could jump on the camel while it was inside of the cart, letting you consistently play its running animation. But nowadays, it doesn't do the same.
The Phantom used to look like a nether mob, but that's the problem. It was never meant to be. So because of this, Mojang switched its red texture to the darker purple colors that we see today.
In snapshot 21W05A, as you can see, our foxes have the ability to walk over powdered snow, making them one of the rare mobs that's able to stay safe from such a drop. So much like us with the carpet trick, they're safe. Hoglins are annoying, but they actually got nerfed, which is that in 1.20.2 snapshot 23W33A, the Hoglin's reach was changed to match its hitbox. So this allows players to avoid its attacks with a 1.5 block pillar, as opposed to needing a 3 block pillar that they needed before this. So if we had our cats here, they used to actually eat pufferfish, but this was changed because obviously pufferfish are poisonous, and we wouldn't want that happening to our cats. Nowadays, it's not gonna work. I'm gonna go into survival for this one because now if I were to step inside of a nether portal and start typing out a message, it'll actually let me type chat inside of the nether portal. And not just that, but also if I were to go inside of the nether portal, it'll still have my message on the other side. Drowned originally used to drop gold ingots instead of the copper ingots that we're familiar with today. And that got changed in snapshot 21W05A for update 1.17. Cave spiders used to be so hostile that they would actually go after you in creative mode. Prior to 1.7, cave spiders could aggro onto creative mode players if you provoked them, like so. But now they've been changed to be like most mobs because there's really no point in going after an invincible target.
All right, pop quiz. What mob is this? I'll give you a hint. It's not a silverfish. Actually, it's just an endermite. See, when the endermite was added in, it was just a purple version of the silverfish before it eventually got this new smaller model that we see today.
Chicken babies used to not be able to swim, and it was pretty sad that prior to 14W33C, if you got one of these baby chickens inside of the water, it was just doomed to drown. So, slimes originally used to spawn anywhere below Y level 32, and the reason this happened is because this existed before slime chunks even existed within the game. And when slime chunks were originally introduced, they would only happen 1 out of every 100 chunks. But then that was quickly changed to the 1 out of every 10 chunks that we see today, making it a lot easier to make your slime farm, even if this doesn't exist where they're spawning below Y level 32.
Nowadays, thanks to hardcore Minecraft, the Totem of Undying texture is iconic. It kinda has to be when everyone's holding in their secondary slot, which makes me even more thankful that it isn't the totem texture that we originally had. Since back in snapshot 16W39A, the Totem of Undying was originally supposed to be added to 1.11 looking like this, which more resembles a peeled banana than actually a villager.
Prior to snapshot 16W32A for the 1.11 update, it used to be that if a skeleton was on fire, it could actually shoot you with flaming arrows, which was a particularly big problem if you had a fire aspect sword or if you got too close to some lava in the caves. But this was deemed a bug and was since changed. When our frogs were originally added in, now we breed them using slime balls, but in the past we used to breed them by using seagrass. And not just that, but as a placeholder sound for them, anytime that they took damage, they would actually play the player damage sound. In Bedrock Edition, it used to be possible for piglin brutes to spawn in peaceful difficulty, seeming very unfitting for one of the most brutal hostile mobs in the game. And luckily, it's since been removed, much like me. Back in 1.13, only the drowned would attack our baby turtles, but as you can see now, that's been changed to actually include things like foxes and cats as well, which I wouldn't say that adding new ways for baby turtles to die would exactly be on my changelog list, but I guess it's accurate, if not a little horrific.
Bone meal's a great thing, but it used to be so much better, since in the past, you could immediately push a crop to its final stage, instead of getting a random buff like we do today, which made it a lot more hilarious to spam trees on your friend's lawn, but I get why it was fixed. It definitely was overpowered. Back in the first versions of Minecraft, and granted, not the beta, but the actual released versions, if you were to punch a tree of any different type, regardless of what it was, you would always break down into oak planks. And it wasn't until later they would actually redesign it so that there were multiple different wood types and oak planks in the game. Look, baby steps are still steps. At least we're moving in the right direction.
We got some kind of ritualistic setup here, and the reason for this is because Minecraft items used to stack up to 100, and this is so not in the game nowadays that the max we can stack it up to is 99. Even with commands, we can't get it up to 100, but now it got reduced down to 64 in the inf dev stages of Minecraft. So it used to be the case where if you were flying with an elytra and you right-clicked a block with your firework, it would place it on the block, which was a very easy way to like die. This is probably the most applicable change that they could have made for a small tweak. I feel like that'll help a lot.
Yeah, really. With the texture updates of 1.14, our Minecraft wooden items started to look a lot different. Not the least of which having to do with the fact that we now had more wooden variations to play around with. But also, if you look at the items instead of the blocks placed within the actual world, you can see some differences start to pop out if you study it right. And I think it's here where you can see that it's actually quite a good redesign. I mean, look at the original spruce door texture to what we now have. One looks like programmer art, and the other one looks like something you'd put in an actual game. And I particularly like the differences that we got to the handles seen on the crimson and warped stem signs. Now they have a crimson and warped stem. But I will say, with all those details that got added, it's weird that if you look at the item slot for the lapis lazuli that goes inside of the enchanting table, that actually became less detailed.
If you were to go into survival and break down a player head that's been placed down, it'll actually still preserve the player's name. Polar bears didn't always have immunity to freezing damage from powder snow. And actually, it used to be possible if you got a polar bear stuck inside of some powder snow. All of that thick fur wasn't keeping it safe, and it would die like the rest of us. But as of snapshot 21W13A, it's been changed, so now they're safe, and thankfully so. As of 1.21.5, snapshot 25W02A, Striders were made to be faster. And if you didn't notice it, because they were only made to be about 2% faster. When giants used to exist, there actually used to be an even older version of the giant that looked exactly like the player. During InfDev, giants were briefly modeled as humans instead of zombies. And so it would look like a giant Steve that was running around.
The brewing stand's arms now connect to the base.
Yes!
Originally, we used to tame our parrots using cookies as a reference to the old saying, Polly wants a cracker. But this was then changed to now kill the parrots because players mentioned in a post that it was harmful because chocolate is actually lethal to parrots, making it the only way to actually die of poison inside the whole game. If you were to take a Zoglin and leash it up, now, because of 1.21.2, snapshot 24W36A, Zoglins will actually retain the lead after zombifying, giving us the ability to leash and pull around a Zoglin. Zombie pigmen drop rotten flesh, which isn't a great food source, but it used to be a whole lot better, because before they were zombified piglins and they were just zombie pigmen, back in alpha version 1.2.0, they used to drop between 0 to 2 cooked pork chops. But that was eventually removed in beta 1.9's pre-release, and that's when we got our familiar rotten flesh and gold drops from these guys. As of 1.20 with snapshot 23W18A, magma cubes are now affected by jump boost potion effect, giving you insanely high jumping magma cubes. And considering that magma cubes jump height also scales with their mob size, that means that if you were to make a supersized magma cube with a supersized potion effect, you could make it jump so high that it would jump completely out of render distance, essentially deleting itself. When wandering traders were first added in, they were incapable of giving the player any emeralds. But now, as of 1.21.5, snapshot 25W07A, the traders now have an option to sell players things for emeralds, in addition to the other experimental changes that we've seen for wandering traders, which are getting added in, now giving us the chance to sell these baked potatoes for emeralds and then buy the other stuff that they're selling, because otherwise you wouldn't exactly be getting anything. You had to already have emeralds to be able to interact with these guys.
If you craft a minecart with a block, it's now shapeless. Normally you'd put it one on top of the other, and that's how it was supposed to be, but now you can move the chest to one corner, the minecart to wherever else you want, and it'll still work.
Oh, okay. I guess that makes sense.
In the older days of Minecraft, when you mined an ore, it would just drop itself, which means that the best that you could possibly hope from your iron or gold ores was a 1-to-1 ratio. But then, as of 1.17, along with the new textures, we also got a much better return on these, through the addition of a new item called raw ore. And now we didn't just have to save our Fortune 3 pickaxe for redstone, diamonds, and lapis, but instead, if we mined everything, we could get a whole bunch more copper, iron, and gold. And then, if you were worried about the storage that you'd lose from not using Silk Touch, don't worry, craft it into a full material block, and now you're holding 9 in a slot instead of just 1.
When beads were first added in, they didn't have anything in their code that made them try to avoid water. And it wasn't until snapshot 19W35A that they actually started to, as you can see here. They just splash along the top, but beforehand, they would just get stuck and they would drown themselves. Unable to escape, their little lungs couldn't take very much. In-game, the Stray's original name during development was entity.skeleton.name, which seems pretty confusing considering that there would have already been an entity with the skeleton name. And this was eventually fixed in 1.11 snapshot 16W32A.
When you think of mobs, you're probably picturing something like this, or this, but probably not this. Though when they were first added in back in the Java Edition survival test, they were just that. And initially, signs would only spawn by pressing the B key, at which point it would say the text, "This is a test of the sign, each line can be 15 characters.
So with vibrant visuals, one of the new things that we can look at, we saw a little bit earlier, is the new fog that happens with the rain.
Oh, wow, I forgot there's a hole in your ceiling.
Why is it raining? Oh,
It's very handy for this specifically. I actually think it's a bit too strong if you ask me. It's like really blue.
Oh my god, now I see it. Whoa.
Before the bogged were fully added during the 1.21 experimental snapshots, the trial chambers would actually just spawn skeletons using tipped arrows as the development placeholder. So you'd see this skeleton just holding tipped arrows and it would still shoot you with poison, ow, like so, but it didn't have any kind of special texture.
When Mojang makes a change, they aren't always decisive. live, and sometimes that means a feature gets added in and then removed in a later update. But this seems particularly indecisive, because back in the inf-dev stages of Minecraft, 4 updates in a row saw leaves change to not decay, decay, not decay, and then decay once again, which is quite the identity crisis, but luckily it's been solved.
Our wolf, sheeps, and pigs now have their legs mirrored, so it's literally just the same leg 4 times, so now it's actually differentiated.
It really is only noticeable on the pig, because the wolf and the other sheep, they don't have different textures like that, but yeah, it's pretty cool.
Small enough tweak, but if we didn't mention it, no one else is going to. Prior to 1.14.3's pre-release 2, Vindicators used to spawn within pillager patrols. So if you saw one of these spawning out in the open, you would have the chance to go against the way more lethal Vindicator, which is capable of dealing up to 19 points of damage on higher difficulties. But they were deemed too dangerous for players to happen upon randomly, and as such, you're only going to find these inside of woodland mansions or the raids when you get the bad omen effect.
Before tall grass made it into Minecraft, we had something called wild grass, which was a mod that added on an extra layer of grass on top of our regular grass to create a kind of pseudo tall grass. Though when we eventually did get tall grass into Minecraft, it was still significantly taller than the wild grass mod, which I guess is why it's not called tall wild grass, huh?
The armadillo's eyes originally used to be on the front of its head, but then it moved to the side in snapshot 24W03A when players reminded Mojang that front-facing eyes are usually for predator animals, whereas ones on the side are usually for prey, which armadillos are. Observer, would you give an example of how this is prey? Thank you. In 1.14 snapshot 18W43A, our ocelots were properly separated from the cat model, making them both into separate mobs. But this also meant something tragic in that we could no longer tame our ocelots. And that made their whole use as a creeper scare tactic kind of obsolete. So in the past, if you used the summon command to bring in a hostile mob on peaceful difficulty, it would summon them for a tick before deleting them. But now if I were to set the difficulty over to peaceful mode and then type in /summon creeper, it'll say monsters cannot be summoned in peaceful difficulty.
Playing Minecraft at max render distance is a big flex, but that's a bit different between the two versions, since Java has a default max of 32 chunks, whereas Bedrock lets us play up to 96. Minecraft sponges used to be a laughingstock. I mean, they were one of the ugliest textures in the game, and to make matters worse, after they were originally added, they actually had their purpose stripped from them. When they were first added, sure, you could use them to drain water, but then, for years in between, they were completely pointless. Add a sponge that doesn't soak up water, and it just looks like ugly cheese. And it wouldn't be until snapshot 14W25A that Jeb finally announced on Twitter that sponges would be changed to soak up water once again. But they'd soak up a lot more than they used to too. And then also following those changes, it would get a new texture in 1.14 along with the rest of them, which is quite the glow up, both in its purpose and in its function.
When you spawn a creaking, it usually should disappear when it becomes day. If I set it to night, and if I were to get a creaking heart, you'll see the difference. Set it to day, immediately disappears. If I were to take this creaking and give it a new name, like NameTad, and then set it over to day, even though it's daylight outside, this creaking won't disappear. So nothing happened just yet, but hit F5. So we can change the camera distance.
Whoa, yeah, because this is what happens when you're on a gas.
I'm really far away. Wow.
How far can we set this?
Can I just go out of the building?
Oh my gosh, I set it up to 100 and I'm just like at the corner. But think of making this for maps, right?
Whoa.
Like a top-down map where you could set people's camera distance like this.
That actually would be pretty cool.
Or like, what if I make it just 1? Ooh, I like that. If you make it down to all the way just 1, then it kind of feels like an over-the-shoulder thing.
Oh yeah, it does. Whoa! It's so up close and personal.
In both Java and Bedrock, parrots are able to dance. But in Bedrock only, if you get a parrot on top of your shoulder, it's still able to have a dance party up there, which is a lot more fun. And I'm kind of jealous that we don't have this on Java.
So what we have is the /dialogue command, which doesn't sound all that exciting until you see what you can do with it. It is now fully possible to make playable pop-up windows like this. So here is Minesweeper recreated in Minecraft.
What?
How do you even do this?
But yeah, we'll get a clip of it working, but sure enough, you're able to make full animations this way.
Yeah, I'm ready for modern day Sethling and Mumbo Jumbo to start making full Disney films.
If you were to go into the skeleton horse's texture file, you'll notice that it used to have a chest embedded within the texture, despite that not actually ever being displayed on the horse. And in fact, even if I have a tamed skeleton horse like this, I can't add a chest on top of it, much the same way that I could if I had a donkey or a mule. When the cod mob was first added into Bedrock, its spawn egg actually used to be fish eggs, which I gotta say, actually looking at that old texture, it looks a lot better than what we have now. I think it's a fun idea having it look like actual fish eggs as opposed to whatever this is.
Before we had wool blocks, we used to have cloth blocks, which functionally were the same thing, just a different name. But also, they had different colors as well. And while some of the color types have remained the same, I mean, we had blue wool the same that we have blue cloth, the different shades of those colors have been lost. And I think that's unfortunate. I mean, builders are always looking for more blocks to be able to build with, so getting rid of any of them, that seems like a rough deal. And if there was some way to craft our wool blocks, or maybe even dye them into these colors in newer versions, I think a lot of players would be a lot happier. At least for pixel art, it'd be nice to have a whole bunch of new shades, just saying. As it is, it's pretty tough to get a beacon to work in the nether, since you've got to clear out all of the nether rack above it. But in the past, it was even worse, since back then, the beacon beam wouldn't even go through the bedrock. So to even get it to work, you'd have to remove the unbreakable block from up top. And thankfully that was corrected in 1.8.2, so you don't have to rely on a glitch to make this happen.
So when Endermen were first introduced in beta 1.8 pre-release, they were able to pick up any block in sight, including bedrock. So we could create a very weird site where an Enderman could pick up bedrock and then place it down somewhere else in your world, basically soft locking you by placing that down. And thankfully that's since been removed. However, it was temporarily added back in during the one block at a time snapshot for April Fools, where they were able to pick up any block again. And if you were to update your world from that version, you could still technically have an Enderman carrying any item. If we go into options and we see here, we've got ourselves the sprint window. This is how many ticks it'll take before you can hit the W key again after tapping it once and begin sprinting. So as you can see here, I tap it once, tap it twice, and it gives me a more forgiving option for that. We do actually have a change to the clouds. They've now make it so that there is a creeper face that generates in the cloud texture.
I'm noticing the clouds are way more shaped. That's actually fascinating. Wow.
It seems rare.
I found it. I found one.
Hey, really?
Yeah, he did. He did find one.
Yeah, there it is.
Wow.
Nowadays, we're all familiar with the concept of an MLG water bucket save, but back in the day, it wasn't as popular, and for good reason. See, in the past, you'd need a puddle that was 2 blocks deep to stop any kind of fall damage, and it wasn't until after 1.4.4 that we could finally do this with one bucket.
In 1.19.3, our Vexes were changed to more closely model the Allay. However, this actually might have been inspired by an earlier Vex pet that we saw in the DLC for Minecraft Dungeons, the Guardian Vex. Giving us a pink Vex, which looks very similar to the Vexes that we see today, but it was also carrying some kind of mace. Just not the maces that we're seeing today.
The end portal frame now blends in better next to endstone, although I don't know why they fixed that, because end portal frames don't generate naturally on top of endstone.
You would never have them near each other, but okay.
And the same happens for mycelium and dirt, which is a little bit more of a common occurrence.
Because we now have copper chains, that's the reason why our iron chains have been renamed to, well, iron chains.
One of the most recent texture changes that was met with applause happened with the bamboo logs. Since during the snapshot phase for Minecraft 1.20, we would not only get a use to turn our bamboo into actual wooden blocks, but we also got this initial texture, where it was yellow on the top despite being green everywhere else. And that made a lot of the community pretty mad, which is why Mojang changed it in the very next snapshot, 22W46A. But they also didn't fully get rid of this. If you wanted green, there was options with that, and if you wanted the yellow coloration, there was also that too, which for builders is always the best option. If you're gonna ask me which texture I want to build with, the answer is all of them. We'll always take more for the palette.
Unlike other hostile mobs, it was changed so that the breezes won't actually aggro against other mobs that happen to hurt it. So if you've ever seen two skeletons shoot at each other because one of them accidentally hits them with an arrow when they're shooting at you, that same behavior isn't mirrored in the breeze. So this was changed during 24W04A so that the breeze becomes particularly more forgiving. Oh, okay. Yep, I guess we'll leave the door open or closed. I'll take your word for it. Oh.
During development, the Evoker used to look pretty different, and we could see that from when Mojang did this Meet the Evoker article. The mob originally had a hat like so, but even though they removed this before release, it's interesting to note that it resembles the one that you see on the Illusioner mob. Though the Illusioner wasn't added officially either, so maybe Mojang just doesn't like hats.
We've got ourselves the lectern. Not for me to give a sermon or anything, but the idea here is that the golden apple was originally added because of a joke that was hidden in someone who made a crafting guide on the Minecraft forum forms. So they made a post saying all of the actual recipes, and then in that, they said this one, and they said, oh, okay, joke item, the golden apple, here's how you craft it. It's not actually in the game. Notch saw that and said, well, I do have that power, and now we got golden apples in the game. Tropical fish used to be able to spawn within inside of our water columns, which meant that we could make highly efficient farms like this, but also had the opportunity to clog up mob caps because it created a lot of unintentional ground items, giving you a fish fountain, but also a lot of fish cleanup. So our horses, donkeys, and mules used to only eat apples, but now they eat carrots.
Can I give them a golden carrot, or am I getting too excited?
You could give them golden carrots in the past. That's actually how you breed them.
They eat a lot of carrots.
When you found a zombie spawner down in the dungeons, it actually used to be possible for zombified villagers to summon in here. But this was later changed in 1.11 snapshot 16W32A, where now our zombie villagers are not going to spawn from the spawner setup, they'll only spawn at night, or if a villager were to get zombified. And it was actually so effective back in the day that Etho was able to make a farm that would supply his village with villagers just from one of these zombie dungeons.
While other ores in Minecraft have been given more recipes and uses, hence given them more value, Minecraft's most iconic ore, diamond, has really just stayed the exact same. I mean, one of the most notable changes for diamond is that now you can turn it into something better. That doesn't exactly seem like we're honoring how important it is. Add on to that the fact that you're able to get diamond tools much easier through villagers than actually going and mining, and really it seems almost pointless to try and go mining for some diamond ore. So if you've ever wondered why diamonds don't feel as special anymore, it's not because they've gotten worse, it's because everything around them's gotten better by comparison. It's a rising tide that did not lift this ship.
In Bedrock Edition, there's a whole bunch of other zombie jockeys than just our classic chicken jockeys. But the strangest of this is that it's actually possible for baby zombies to ride the adult zombies. And while here we have it mocked up in Java Edition with it riding on top of its head, it actually, in Bedrock Edition, will ride on its shoulders. Given a bit of collision in the models, which looks a little odd, but I like the idea that it's given a piggyback ride. Snow golems can't be bred. However, this used to be possible if you actually used wheat. Though, stranger still is that while we could breed them up with wheat, they would also attack you if you were holding that very same wheat. So I guess they want to be dating, but they don't. I don't know. Love's a confusing subject.
Shulker boxes are a crucial item to get your hands on, but while they're great for storage, they're not the best for item security. For an example, if you took all of your best valuables and enchanted tools into this one box, then if you dropped it into lava or something, all of it would get destroyed, even if it was netherite. But now we might have a chance to save some. In 1.17, a shulker box will pop when destroyed, allowing some of the items to escape the danger.
If we were to take a fire aspect sword and then kill off a guardian, then much like other mobs that we kill off using fire aspect, they actually have a chance of dropping cooked versions of cod as a food item. Though it's gonna be a rare drop. Even with looting 3, I'm still having trouble getting it. There you go, cooked cod. And funnily enough, the way that fire aspect impacts drops, this actually can still happen underwater. Bats don't do a lot in Minecraft, but at some point they actually were intended to. Since when Notch was floating around the idea for the bats originally for a Halloween update, he mentioned that they could be a potential aggressive mob. Actually working more like vampire bats that you see in different mods, sucking your blood when they got next to you. And while I can't say that I exactly want hostile bats around in the caves, it would do a lot more than just having bats that do absolutely nothing in caves. So here we've got ourselves a furnace, and what we're going to see with this example is originally you could use flint and steel and throw your items in to smelt them up. And the same was true of lava, which is kind of a funny concept to me, of the idea of just putting your cobblestone right on the edge, hoping that it gets exactly cooked enough but not burnt. Feels like trying to roast a marshmallow. And honestly, if this is the way that you could smelt ancient debris into netherite scrap, I think that'd be really cool.
If you've ever killed a bunch of mobs at an XP grinder, then you're well and aware that these orbs could cause a ton of lag. So thankfully, the Carpet Mod team had a feature that would allow experience orbs to combine into larger entities so that you didn't have as many on screen. And while it was a great solution, it was only third party. That is, until now, where in recent versions, the orbs will actually merge to cut down on entity count. And it's a nice touch for sure.
Spectators will now teleport with the entities that they're spectating through a portal. So if I were to go into spectator mode, and then there's a mob that we bring through, I don't know, like if I punch Jay, I'm spectating Jay now, and if Jay goes through a portal, it used to be I wouldn't go through with Jay, but now I do. I just also dismount from Jay.
Oh, so there's no privacy anymore. You're just following me everywhere I go. Okay.
There's no privacy. I'm just following you. This is so weird to watch you and like, I'm just playing my own J-Moji simulator later.
What's up, guys? Today we're playing Jmoji Sim. We're gonna go to the end.
Emoji Sim 2014. Now, there's some people who talk about an albino Enderman, but before we had that, we had this version of the Enderman that just looks ridiculous. Here's a regular Enderman. Everyone's familiar with that. But I take this, and we see the original Enderman just looks like a black morph suit. No part of this fits how we're expecting it to. And having to look at this with its jaw unhinging, that would be particularly weird. Maybe even more eerie? I don't entirely know.
I think we all can agree that more accessibility options are always a good thing, which is why it's a real treat to see that the flashing lights from a lightning storm can now be toggled off like so. And if it lets me build a machine like this without the headache that comes with, that's definitely a plus.
Obviously, this is how the Wandering Trader looks nowadays. It's got this classic blue robes, and it looks like a nitwit villager on the inside. But originally, it used to look like this. And Mojang put out their book showing the world of Minecraft, and they showed off different concept art in there. And one of the things that we could see is that the Wandering Trader originally used to have this really big green bulb in the center of its forehead. But this one's kind of iconic, so now it's here to stay. So now what we're looking at is the different changes of Minecraft's logo. Check this out. So originally, Minecraft had what to me feels a lot more like a RuneScape style logo. And it's kind of interesting thinking about any version of the design not having the creeper in it, but there you go. It looks like they integrated a pickaxe that would go behind the raft parts of the letters. You had the block in the background. That just looks like a Minecraft server that I would join on to. This one definitely feels very MMO style. Yeah, and some of these were sketched out by Junk Boy, who originally used to do their merch. I believe that'd be this one over here. Until eventually they decided that you can't beat the classic. The Blaze and Breeze spawn eggs. Well, first of all, you guys noticed that all the spawn eggs have new textures, but they used to be jumbo sized. Here's how you can see the different spawn egg sizes. So there was a tiny, a medium, and a jumbo.
Whoa, I like the jumbo.
The Blaze and Breeze used to be that size, but now they're shrunk down to the regular size.
If you used to play Minecraft back in the beta versions, then you're used to your hotbar looking a lot different. Since before beta version 1.8, the hunger bar did not exist at all, and instead eating food would just help you to regenerate. And of course, since the game's full release, we've only had the hunger bar for a generation, which I'll be honest, when you see how quickly we were able to heal in some of these old examples, it does kind of feel like I'm missing out.
This one sounds bad, but hear it out. Since now, Mojang has removed spawn chunks from the game, which if you were using technical farms back in the day, you knew that spawn chunks were chunks that were constantly loaded around the world spawn, where you could make highly efficient farms by just having them always running within the spawn chunks of the server. But now Mojang has said that there's multiple different alternative options to this, including the force load command if you want to have something done on the admin side, or you can use player-made chunk loaders made from ender pearls to do it as well. But because a lot of players never use the spawn chunk functionality in that way in the first place, it'll make the game run a lot better if you didn't plan to use those anyway.
Now, when you're playing Minecraft, you're probably not using a horse very much. I mean, ever since the Elytra, these have not seemed like the best inclusion in Minecraft. And while that itself is a downgrade, it doesn't seem like Mojang's done kicking the horse when it's dead. Since in between updates, Mojang actually changed the horse model to make it look a lot less detailed. And now if you take a look at the hooves of the horse with the actual snout, you'll realize it's quite a bit different. Now compare this to the skeleton horse, which I actually think got an upgrade in how it looks. Minecraft bricks, even though they were added in pretty early on to Minecraft, are not that popular of a building block. And one of the reasons for that could be the change in texture. See, if you ask me, the old brick texture was much better, given a vibrant, colorful red brick. Nowadays you look at him and it just seems sad. At this point I just feel like I'm using dirt with a better blast resistance. A lot of fans are clearly very excited when we got the Caves and Cliffs update with changes to our world generation. And as we should be, it made the game a lot more impressive to play around with. But not every change to the game's world generation's been met so kindly. And in beta 1.8, a lot of players were not a fan of how the new worlds looked. Here, the plains biomes became incredibly flat, with little to no variation between the blocks or the height. And what was even worse is if you happen to have the misfortune to spawn in the middle of the ocean. When you don't have any trees nearby to get you off that survival island, you might as well just start a new seed. And for a while, an ocean would be a death sentence without a boat. And back then, boats weren't exactly easy to row around in either. And so it's amazing to see how far we've come in our world generation since then. After all, a big part of how you play the game just comes down to the seed that you're given, so when so many of them ended up being rotten, you could see how this was a clear downgrade to what there was before.
Most of the time we're hitting the F3 key to check our coordinates, but now if you hit F3, you're gonna see that it looks very different, and this is the simplified F3 debug menu. But if you miss some of the old features, now what you could do to edit it is hit F3 and F6, giving you the debug options menu. And if you want to always show your player position, then your coordinates are going to be player position always.
Minecraft villages used to be rare, but a rare thing isn't always a good thing. It definitely isn't always pretty. And so there were some times when you would happen to spawn next to a village or find one out in the wild, and it would just not blend in with its surroundings. And as we got more biomes, that became painfully noticeable. So thankfully, in the Village and Pillage update, Mojang took this and made the villages actually change to redesign to their spawn location. So if a village spawns in a savanna biome where there's acacia planks, then of course it's going to be built out of acacia. And then having the villagers also match their clothes to the environment's a nice touch.
And with that, folks, YouTube thinks that you might like this video, so see if they're right and have a good one, alright?